We're here with the director of Arthur Rambo, Laurent Cantet, and also interpreting for us today is Sian. Laurent, welcome. Thank you so much for bringing the film to the Toronto Film Festival and for this conversation today.
Thank you for the invitation.
I wanted to begin by asking you about, I guess, truth and fiction. Arthur Rambo is drawn in part from a recent true story in France. I wonder what elements from the facts of that story were important for you to keep, and where did you want to expand it into fiction?
Right. There had been many stories of that kind in France, by the way. And what interested me in this story is to just look at the power of social medias and the danger also of social medias for young people especially, but for many people too. And it was also a way to look at the complexity of what can be said on social media. You know, when you speak in 140 characters, it's impossible to be precise in what you mean. So I think it's bringing our way of thinking to something very simple and very, very frustrating for people who like complexity. And so that's all the things I like. And also, it's not, comment c'est pas par hasard.
It's not by chance.
Not by chance.
It's not by chance.
Sorry, Sian, this is your job.
Sorry.
Don't need me.
So it's not by chance that most of these stories involve children from other culture or originally from other countries, and I think it's very. Bon, j'ai continué en français, excusez-moi. Non, je pense que les médias sociaux sont un révélateur aussi de tous les problèmes, toutes les dissensions qu'il peut y avoir dans notre société. Et que cette histoire nous dit bien plus, bien au-delà de la simple question des réseaux sociaux, qui déjà me semble très importante à regarder précisément parce que elle a envahi notre vie et que finalement on n'y pense peut-être pas tellement.
So social media unveils or reveals all of society's issues in a way. And this story goes beyond just simple social media. Social media itself needs to be talked about, but it has now taken over all of our lives.
I'm especially interested in this story because you contrast the world of publishing and letters in France, which is the vehicle for the most complex ideas in French society, or often in society generally, with social media, which, as you say, is very compressed, can be very simplifying in many ways. And yet you show a publishing industry that's trying to keep up with this new world of social media. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the film shows us these two worlds and how they contend with one another.
Je pense que déjà ce que révèle le film, au-delà même de la fracture entre l'édition et les réseaux sociaux, c'est aussi une fracture générationnelle. C'est-à-dire que Arthur Rambo, alias Karim D, ne réagit pas du tout comme son éditrice qui a 60 ans et pour qui les réseaux sociaux peuvent être parfois un moyen de faire un peu de publicité pour ses livres, mais qui n'a pas cette conscience de la puissance des réseaux sociaux. Et elle est face à un jeune homme qui, lui, vit avec ça, a toujours son téléphone à la main et tweet toutes les 5 secondes. Et d'ailleurs, il lui dit à un moment, mais le problème, c'est que j'ai 200 000 followers et aucun de ces followers n'a été choqué par ce que j'ai écrit. Donc, où est le problème? C'est-à-dire que d'un seul coup, ces réseaux sociaux se substituent au monde réel, à la morale de à notre vieille morale, si vous voulez, de vieux dinosaures enfin, du vieux dinosaure que moi je suis, en tous les cas, je ne vais pas vous inclure dans l'histoire, et que ça, déjà, cette fracture générationnelle me semble très importante.
So beyond a commentary of just contrasting the worlds of publishing and social media, it's also showing a generational fracture, a generational contrast. Arthur Rambo, or Karim D, his real identity, if you compare him to his publisher, a 60-year-old woman, she may use social media for occasional purposes, such as promoting her books and so on. But if you remember Arthur Rambo, he lives in that world. It's omnipresent. He tweets every 5 seconds. He always has his phone on his hands. And therefore, for him and others like him, social media is replacing the real world. And so it is a commentary on this generational divide as well. For their old dinosaurs, like myself. I don't want to all call you old dinosaurs. Maybe you're very active, but that was one of the main points as well.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask?
There is another thing, which is that I think it talks about the power of words. What you write is as a meaning, as an influence on the people who read it, and right, it's not the same when you write a book and you spend 2 years writing it and thinking it, and when you write a tweet that takes you 5 seconds, and but the words, when they are written, exist and go on existing, even if you think nobody remember them.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask, do you use social media yourself?
No.
Never? Not Twitter, not Facebook, nothing?
No, I think I prefer to talk to people. I take my telephone and talk to my friends, and right, I think I don't have time for that, I guess. Mm-hmm. Or I don't see what I could get from it.
You don't see the value, yeah. No. You know, in addition to the differences you've pointed out already, there is a kind of an ethical responsibility with social media. Maybe this is also true with literature, but you're creating another persona. And Karim specifically creates Arthur Rambo to be more provocative than himself, to be able to say things that he wouldn't say in real life in the same way. It's a part of him, but it's not him. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that ethical responsibility with these kind of two lives, the real human being and the online persona.
Well, I think that first, if you want to exist in this jungle of social media, you have to be either very funny or very shocking or very clever. But I think it's more rarer. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure Karim doesn't think what he writes on Twitter. I think it's just a way to exist, a way to get some like and to get more followers. Mm-hmm. Because one of a thing which is important for him and for many people today is popularity, and this popularity brings you to say anything, mm-hmm. just to get followers. And Mehdi Meklat, the guy, the film is based on some part of his history. Told me, I met him once, and he told me that the day he wrote the worst thing on the internet, mm-hmm. he got in 1 second 10,000 followers added to his followers. Mm-hmm. And so that's I think the system built that. Mm. The responsibility, the moral responsibility of people who write on Twitter is, should be the same than when you write a book or an article in a newspaper. But since everything has to go so fast on Twitter, you have to be the first one to react. You have to be the first one to be retweet. And I don't think you can have enough distance to really assume what you write.
Mm-hmm. And yet, you mentioned Karim does this to feed a hunger for popularity, but that's always been there. As human beings, we all want to be popular in some circle or another. What do you think's different now?
It's not the same thing to be popular with your friend and with your neighbors, and being popular in the whole world. And I think it can make people get crazy, which is what happened to Karim, I guess. When he started to write, he would just write for his 2 or 3 friends who were on Twitter, and he had the feeling that it was just a way to chat with friends. And then without like by magic, you realize that you have 10,000 people who read you, and you go on doing the same. That's what you did with your friends.
I am curious, though, about, in French literature, politics, cinema even, there are also artists who provoke. The namesake, Arthur Rambo, was a provocateur as a poet in some ways. We have filmmakers today who go to the Cannes Film Festival, for instance, or release films that are shocking deliberately. And I guess I wonder if you see this as a continuum, or do you see the online world of social media as being completely different?
Well, I don't want to look like a dinosaur again, but I think that when you take time to think and to build a film, a book, or you can be considered as really responsible of what you write, what you say, because that's a process, and that's what doesn't exist on social media, I guess. And so I think that when a filmmaker makes a film that shocks, he knows that he doesn't make it just to shock. There is no it's not a purpose, I guess.
Okay, I think you may have more confidence in filmmakers than I do sometimes. But okay, let me ask you next about what I found was one of the more moving parts of the film, which is the relationship between Karim, the writer, and his brother, Farid. And Farid really looks up to Karim and his Arthur Rambo persona, and he feels betrayed when Karim starts to distance himself from what he's written in the past and from that more provocative persona. Can you talk a little bit about how that works within the story, and how that provocation can sometimes attract loyalty that maybe goes beyond what the original intention was?
Je vais répondre en français,
si
vous voulez bien. Le petit frère donc de Karim, Farid, ce que je veux pas, c'est faire des généralisations avec ce personnage. D'abord parce que je pense que c'est un personnage passionnant en soi, et que j'ai eu envie de décrire un jeune homme un peu perdu, un jeune homme partagé entre une foi totale dans ce que son grand frère peut dire et faire, et une colère très très grande, une colère sociale très très grande, parce que c'est un gamin qui vit dans une cité, qui a une vie très très dure, qui ne se sent pas pris en compte par la société, et que à travers ce que son frère pouvait dire par provocation, il a cru pouvoir trouver une façon de défendre ses points de vue à lui. Peut-être qu'il faut que j'arrête pour la traduction.
Yes, Farid, the little brother. I don't want to overgeneralize too much because Farid is someone with his own history. He's an interesting character in himself. He's a young man who's divided between his absolute loyalty towards his older brother and also this deep anger, social anger, because he lives in a city full of hardships, and he's divided between these two feelings, and he was able to let so Karim's provocations and his words was a way to have him understand himself in a way.
Bon, il y a un des aspects du film qui est pour moi le plus difficile peut-être à aborder comme ça, parce que dans un film, les choses sont certainement plus transcrites de manière plus sensible qu'intelligente parfois. C'est l'antisémitisme qu'exprime et Karim dans ses tweets et son petit frère quand il lui en parle. Et cet antisémitisme, là encore, je ne veux pas généraliser, c'est-à-dire que, mais en même temps, je pense qu'on ne peut pas ne pas prendre en compte le fait que c'est un phénomène qui existe malheureusement dans les cités, et que c'est un phénomène, alors vieux comme le monde, hein, le phénomène du bouc émissaire. Les jeunes déshérités des cités, ben oui, cherchent un bouc émissaire, et que la figure du juif continue à être malheureusement la première idée qui vient.
And one of the hardest aspects of the film for me to show, because usually in film, sometimes we try to show things it needs some sensibility to show some aspects. And one of the hardest part for me was the anti-Semitism that was shown through Karim's tweets. And Farid as well when he talks about it. And I also don't want to overgeneralize anti-Semitism, obviously, but it's a real phenomenon. It's an issue as old as the world, this scapegoating issue. The Jew, that whole idea lives on, and it's a very old idea that does exist.
Mais ce qui m'intéresse, par contre, c'est la façon dont finalement Karim va progressivement, en répondant aux questions qui lui sont continuellement posées, mais pourquoi est-ce que tu as écrit ça? Pourquoi est-ce que tu as écrit ça? Va finir par formuler quelque chose qui me semble très juste par rapport à lui, mais aussi par rapport aux réseaux sociaux. C'est, je dirais, pour gagner des followers, il faut choquer. Et qu'est-ce qu'il y a de plus choquant aujourd'hui que l'antisémitisme? Il n'y a rien. Donc voilà, j'ai effectivement donné dans cette facilité-là, sans pour autant, je pense, enfin moi, j'ai le sentiment que Karim n'est pas antisémite.
And what's interesting for me to explore is that Karim, by progressively answering all these questions that were asked to him, why did you write that? Why did you write that? He came to his own conclusion. He eventually said, in order to gain followers, I needed to shock. And what is more shocking in this world than anti-Semitism? Nothing is more shocking. So he went for the shock effect in order to gain followers. But in my mind, Karim is not an anti-Semitist.
The last thing I want to ask you, because we are running out of time, I want to just connect Arthur Rambo to some of your earlier films. Of course, you won the Palme d'Or for The Class. Other films include Human Resources and The Workshop, often dealing with French institutions. In this case, it's the media and publishing, I suppose, a related world. And you've often shown the challenge that young people and that young immigrants in particular pose to traditional French institutions. I wonder if you could talk about how Arthur Rambo fits within that context of your other films, and whether you think France is now maybe a bit more willing to accept that challenge that fraternité can take many forms.
Oui, enfin, ce qui est sûr, c'est que le film essaye, comme mes films précédents, d'abord de restituer la complexité de notre société, toutes ses contradictions, mais essaye aussi de réfléchir à l'assignation à résidence à laquelle sont condamnés beaucoup de jeunes gens aujourd'hui. C'est-à-dire qu'on est d'un milieu et on y restera. Il y a un déterminisme social très très fort en France qui fait qu'effectivement, quand on est du mauvais côté du périphérique, enfin, du mauvais entre guillemets, mais on est condamné à y rester. Karim D essaye d'être un transfuge. Il va franchir le périphérique et il va entrer dans Paris, il va entrer dans le monde de la culture, il va entrer dans un monde très, très franco-français, si on veut, et on va lui en interdire l'entrée en ressortant ces tweets anciens qui le condamnent à repartir chez lui. Mm. Et ça, je pense que la société française est très fracturée, elle l'est encore, et que je ne suis malheureusement pas si optimiste que vous quant au changement que vous mentionnez. Okay.
Like my other films, I wanted to show the complexity of French society and its many contradictions. And secondly, this kind of social determinism, how you're assigned according to where you live. So there's the périphérique, which is a highway that divides the suburbs with the core of the city. And Karim D, in a way, is trying to cross that divide, that real and imaginary divide. He crosses into French culture. He crosses into something that's very French. And he does that by using these old tweets. These old tweets actually, in a way, is to send him back home beyond the périphérique. Mm-hmm. And so unfortunately, I'm not as optimistic as you are in terms of all the social changes that are happening.
Mm. Laurent, thank you so much for this conversation. I could have spoken for hours with you about it. I think it's a fascinating subject and a fascinating film. And thank you again for bringing it to Toronto.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Sian.
Thank you very much. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.